All right, so I would like to introduce Marion. Marion Barnes is a former newspaper journalist turned strategic communicator, now serving at the City of Eugene after leading communications at Western Oregon University and Oregon's Early Learning Division. Marion is a lifelong Pacific Northwesterner and proud University of Oregon alum.
Wow.
Brings a storyteller's heart and a marketer's mind to public service, while balancing life with 2 adult daughters, a mischievous cat, and a mini dog. Please welcome Marion. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, well, when they told me that I was going to be starting the conference, I was a little worried. I didn't expect to be the first person. However, I'm glad to see that everyone seems to be very awake, because the last time I spoke at a conference, I had the last session of the day, and it was brutal, and I had to actually create like an activity to make sure people stay awake. So thank you all for looking bright and eager-eyed this morning. I do have a confession to make. I had my own emergency on my way here, and that I actually accidentally left my laptop behind at the Eugene Airport. So this is gonna be fun. All right, here we go. So I just want to preface my speech here today with talking about the fact that a lot of what I'm going to tell you is very specific. It's for very particular audiences. And it is specifically about how to alert them in emergency situations. But hopefully you'll be able to get some other topics out of this, just about audience segmentation and some other things that are really applicable to all kinds of audiences in all kinds of situations. So I just don't want anyone to think that this is so narrow of a topic that it can't be applied everywhere, because it certainly can. So here's me as introduced, former newspaper journalist, degree in strategic communications, I'm a double duck, so that's even worse. I've been in the public sector for quite a bit, and I'm really enjoying my job at the City of Eugene. Technically, I'm in the Public Works Department, which is the department that really sees all of the emergency situations, right? Who's the first on site in a weather emergency or anything like that. If there's snow, we have to clear the roads before the police can even get to help anyone. So really, we're the original first responders. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're just gonna be talking about how to set the stage for looking at your audiences for being ready in an emergency situation, and being prepared and ready to go when an emergency happens. All right, so the first step, as we all know, to anything in communications is really establishing a goal and then doing your research. So we're going to be talking a little bit about research here. And the first thing you want to do is know your community. Every community is different. In my community, we have a very vocal liberal and a very vocal conservative contingent. We have a lot of Spanish speakers. We have a very large homeless population. So you just have to know what different audiences you're looking for, right? We all know this about our community. I think sometimes when you dig into the research, though, you find a little bit more than you thought. So, for example, in Woodburn, Oregon, which is just north of Salem, they print everything in Spanish first. English is the alternative, not the default. So things like that, you just need to know. They also have a very large Russian Orthodox population, so a lot of their materials are also printed in Russian. So lots of different things to know about your community. Does anyone have a particular niche community where they are that makes you unique? Come on, someone's got one. Yeah. Go ahead.
We have a decent Indian population because we have an Indian Sri Ganesha temple.
Okay, great. Indian population, go ahead.
We have a ton of different populations in Fort Bend County in Texas. We're right next to Houston, so it's been kind of a pilgrimage, I guess, for people to come to that area. We have a lot of Indian population. We have a high Middle Eastern population, Hispanic. So we have multiple different languages.
Right, so you have a lot of language considerations, you said. Middle Eastern, Indian, etc. So it's just really important to know your community, and you can do that by checking out the latest census data that's updated all the time online. Look at your nonprofit organizations. What kind of nonprofit organizations are very strong and very active in your area? That's going to tell you kind of some specific audiences that people might be serving in that area. I used to have a colleague who was with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in Portland, and it was really eye-opening talking with that group when I got a chance to, and hearing about some of their concerns that were much different than other contingencies in the area. In-person conversations, obviously, always very important. Survey data, talking with your local law enforcement. They will always know the different populations in the area, and they probably are the best bet for learning about populations that you may have been unaware of. Within our homeless population in Eugene, there is a specific group that is in a very specific part of town, and they kind of view themselves as a club, and they have sort of a leader that they've designated themselves. So by law enforcement knowing that, we definitely know who the connectors and influencers in that population are. So in looking at your audiences, some of the examples, you may have rural or off-grid people. We have a lot of those in Lane County and Eugene, either by choice or just they're rural and there's not a lot of connectivity network out there. Seniors and alter-abled. The seniors can be sort of 65 to 75. When you get to elderly, over 75, you end up with a whole different specific set of needs, right? Someone mentioned other types of languages that we need. If you have tribal nations in your area, they are sovereign and therefore have their own set of rules. You just need to know what those rules are and how to work within them. Then you want to know from your audience, who do they trust and how do they communicate? If you don't have much internet, how are people talking to each other? There's ham radio, there are radio relays, there are gathering places, granges, elks lodges, things like that you might find people at. That's where they might gather. And then your challenges, who do they distrust? That is almost as important as knowing who they trust, because you do not want to send a messenger out there that is not going to be effective or actually damage the relationship because they just don't see eye to eye. What are your threats to communications? And specifically, what do they need during emergencies? So again, thinking back to, say, that elderly population, they're probably facing mobility challenges. They may need medication help. They may need oxygen support, things like that. All right, and then options. I'm not sure what happened to my formatting here, but on options, take a look at all of the different communications pieces you have. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about what you do if the power is out, because that is, in Eugene, we're expecting a Cascadia earthquake event at any moment. So everything that we're doing is predicated on not having power, having limited ability to move around on the roads, and having emergency supplies needed for sheltering in place for a long time. So that is part of the communications that we're doing with our community. If you do have internet, there are some things in here that you can use, obviously, for internet. We're well versed in that, but if you don't have it, different ways to communicate with people. These are some of the risks you might be facing in your area. Some of those actually can be anywhere. In Eugene, we just got out of a heat wave. We also have extreme cold all the time. Power outages, sometimes the power companies turn the electricity off on purpose if wildfire danger is nearby. Health risks, we all just went through COVID and have PTSD from that. In Salem, Oregon, we recently had a threat to the drinking water because of algae, and so it was a boil notice for weeks. And when I was at Western Oregon University, we did active shooter drills all the time. So those are the things that you just have to be prepared for. Wildfires, huge in our area as well. And then you'll have to know your communications limitations. One thing that is really interesting about cell towers is that a lot of people don't know they generally don't have backup. If they do have backup, it's for a couple hours. It's not required, at least in Oregon, to have a power backup for your cell phone towers. So most of the telecommunications companies don't do it. again, these are just things that you need to be asking about in your area. I just had a very detailed conversation about the capabilities of the local radio station at Blaine Community College. What would happen if their power went out? What kind of generators did they have? Radio is one of the best ways to get people when the power is out, and so I just want to make sure that they were going to be able to transmit our messages. So lots to think about there, and it really is just doing the research on what's called Blue Sky Days, right? And then I know later in the sessions this afternoon, we're going to be having other topics where people are going to be talking about how to prepare, how to know your audience. I know there's a market analysis session coming up too. So there's lots to learn today about how to do these things. Is a hotline possible? Might be another situation. If you do have phone service, you'll want to have a centralized hotline. These are all things that you're probably talking about anyway in an emergency situation. But again, you just want to keep checking in. Are we still planning this? Are we still staffed up for this? As we're all facing budget challenges, you just want to make sure that your customer service people are still available if you do need to do a hotline. What is the first responder standard operating procedure? So as I mentioned, in Eugene, when it snows, our operating procedure for public works is all hands on deck. You got to clear the roads of trees, of snow, of ice, so that emergency vehicles and other first responders can get through. If you don't know that, then you don't know that there's going to be a delay before police are able to help people. You don't know which routes they're going to plow first and where you can be mobile if you need to be mobile. Again, this is all just things you need to ask ahead of time. And then finally, an interesting thing I've recently learned about gas pumps, and maybe everybody else knows this, but this was news to me, is that most of them these days require an internet connection to even work at all. And so if you're thinking it's an emergency, I'm gonna go to the gas station and fill up a gas can, that's absolutely not happening. And another interesting part of that, though, is that if you were to use gas stations as a place to post information, because you're assuming lots of people are going to be there, they're not going to be there because the pumps don't work, so there's no reason to go. What I would suggest in this case is find your old school gas station in your area, where they're still running those pumps from the 1950s, and make that your notification place. Or I think they have these everywhere. We have Pacific Pride, which is like where the farmers go to get their fuel. I think that one would be another good place to be posting information. All right, I'm gonna try to keep us going here. So communications resources, what do you have? Who has an emergency alert system in their sort of area, county? Okay, quite a few. Who think they might have one but aren't sure? All right, fair enough. So definitely something to ask about, and also if it is something that's available in your area, try to be doing regular campaigns or working with agencies that can do regular campaigns to get people to sign up for those. I know we've all heard, well, I didn't know about it a million times in our profession, and this is a great one to be getting information about. All right, so know what your alternate languages are. If you're going to be online, you can use Google Translate in a pinch. A lot of other websites allow you to use other language translation tools, but just know what you've got. If you do not have power, obviously your ability to translate into other languages is going to be hampered. So again, in advance, just know that, have your documents, have your messaging written in Spanish and ready to go out on alert or anywhere you have to do it if you don't have the alert opportunity. Lots of different radio types, ham radio, weather radio, radio relays, which are very close-in radio networks where it's just sort of tower to tower, but it's great for rural areas where there's very limited connectivity. Cell phones, trap lines, meaning places where you can put in-person notices like the gas stations, churches, grocery stores, things like that. Those are very important if you can get to them. Again, thinking back to that earthquake, you may not be able to get to those. So you have to be thinking about what is going to be appropriate for communication, posting things, given the limitations you might be having after some sort of emergency. And then finally, your networks, you've got community partners, you've got those nonprofit organizations that hopefully you've been making relationships with ahead of time because you reached out and you were doing research. Who are the nonprofits in my area? Introduce yourself to those people. Ask how they communicate. Do they have a newsletter? Do they have a phone tree? Do they have regular meetings that you can go to and talk about things? All right? I can tell this is all overwhelming and I'm trying to go really fast. Again, keep takeaways, just looking at your audiences, ways to do that research, and then knowing your communications options for when it's needed. It may not be the case that you'll ever need these or that you even have some of these options. Again, just keeping it in mind. Take what you can from this, even if it's not 100% applicable in your particular position. Tribal liaisons are very important. Neighborhood associations. Senior centers are great. In my experience, they're great as far as emergency preparedness and wanting to make sure that their residents and visitors are taken care of. All right, so what you need to know for each audience is what are the challenges, what do they need in an emergency, who do they trust, who do they distrust, and then finally, which communications options are going to be the best. If you're talking, well, we'll get to it, but I'm just thinking when we're talking about rural community members in Lane County, sometimes you do not go on their property, and sometimes law enforcement goes out there with a bullhorn and yells at them from outside the fence. If that's the kind of communication tool that they need and use, you have to be prepared to set your law enforcement up for success with that, making sure that they're getting the key message across in the little amount of time they may have before someone brandishes a shotgun. Okay, so getting to specific audiences. Again, I don't know if you all have these audiences in your area, but this can be applied really to any audience. So if we're talking about senior citizens and anyone with sort of other abilities, a hard of hearing, blind, deaf, somebody who has just cognitive abilities, things like that, you'll want to be thinking about what types of challenges they're going to have, right? So I mentioned mobility challenges. They may have limited transportation. If you are in a resident facility that's 14 floors tall, like we have in Eugene, you're going to have different needs than somebody who's coming out of their home, right, and needs to have emergency supplies or needs to be transported, things like that. As far as who they trust, generally, and I admit here that I am making stereotypes, completely admittedly, again, it may not be applicable to everyone in this population, but that research that you're doing ahead of time is going to let you know whether it is or not, or whether you need to tweak these things. But generally, older people tend to trust authority figures, police, fire. They still trust newspapers, surprisingly. Medical staff, EMS, if someone comes out and can give messages face-to-face, that's an option. We have a great relationship with our EMS group, and so they know that if we ever have a message in a case of emergency, like here's where you go for emergency water, that they're sharing those when they're visiting people in their homes and doing welfare checks. Welfare checks are very important among this audience. And then you'll look at the options there, the different places that you have to either post live information or to use the influencers in the senior centers, the community centers, and things like that to help get your message out. All right, so as the abstract for this speech said, your relationships are going to be key. You need to be building these relationships on blue sky days so that you're ready and can call for their help. You have to warn them, but call for their help when it's needed for an emergency. Okay? Rural and off-grid folks. So as I said, limited access to their property. They generally have livestock and pets that they will not want to leave. We have a lot of horse people. No offense if anyone here is a horse person, but people with livestock in Lane County. We find that people are more willing to leave cows than they are willing to leave horses. Make of that what you will. And they often don't have a place to go if they are asked to leave. Evacuations are very, very common in our area, and so having a place to go is something that we just have to do. We can't evacuate people and not have a place for them to go, assuming they'll find friends or family. We have to provide that, which we generally do at the fairgrounds. They're also often concerned about their crop maintenance, what's going to happen if I'm away for a week, to what's in the field. They're also very prone to not wanting to leave, particularly the men. If there are children in the family, young children, they're more likely to evacuate. This is not the case if there aren't kids, and it depends on how rural they are. We have a lot of people who sort of, Oregon's full of forests, right? We have a lot of people who just camp off-grid in the forest. Very difficult to reach, very difficult for me to even know where they are, but law enforcement always knows where they are. Okay, and places that you can reach them, you can use the weather radio relays, in-person hail, that's that screaming from over the fence if you need to. Phone hotlines, telephone is very important for this population in an emergency. And then places to post physical notices, grocery store, feed supply, gas outlet. And vets offices, veterinarians' offices can be a great resource because many have large animals, and so they know that they work closely with their vet and trust them. I'm going to leave time for questions here, so as I see people like, oh, I really want to ask a question, we'll have some time at the end. So for an unhoused or transient population, and by transient here I mean visitors, Eugene is a destination, and so we have a lot of visitors at all times. How do you contact people who aren't even from your community? You don't have their emails or any sort of contact information. So this would be, they would fall under this category. Limited access to internet or to a phone, lots of pets. Cell phone ownership among the homeless population, I'd say probably 75% in our community have cell phones, but others don't, and so you'll need to plan for that. Transportation is always an issue, and then there are other sort of mental health, safety, other types of considerations that you want to have in effect. We have a organization until very recently in Eugene called Cahoots, which was like a mobile mental health service, and they would be fantastic partners for helping get messages out, helping make sure people are evacuating or getting to emergency water or whatever it was needed. So there's actually been studies of how the unhoused population likes to communicate. It's almost always person to person. They like to be in person, face to face. Feels much more personal, a lot less threatening. Law enforcement is not who they want to talk to. So definitely be thinking about the nonprofits, the mental health support, those types of groups, community members, and nonprofit organizations, again. And options for communication, again, working through those community leaders, the crisis intervention personnel. Cell phone alerts will work for those who have them. And then word of mouth is always the best because this group is going to be very mobile. You're never going to really know whether the visitors are in one place or another. You really have to saturate all of the areas that you can. Otherwise, they will not find it. Alternate languages and subculture clusters. So this is the Spanish population in Woodburn that I was talking about, the Russian Orthodox population. Language barriers here. Also very tight-knit cultures and very difficult to break into. This is often the case with the tribal nations as well. So any relationship that you can build with non-native English speakers, anybody that you just know needs extra help in communications in general, right? And then also in emergency situations. Think about culture-specific gender roles. This one has been very interesting for us, where if we would go out to speak to someone in their home, it was usually a mom and a large family at home, which was great, but they wouldn't do anything without the husband chiming in as well. Like, we're not going to leave until our family leader is here, and so that is a consideration. You want to try to be there at a time when the entire family is more likely to be at home. If you're trying to build these relationships, you see some examples of physical locations there that you can reach them, in addition to the in-person. Religious leaders are very important here as well. These are all about just introducing yourself to people, establishing that relationship, and then if you let them know, I'm going to be your contact, or so-and-so is going to be your contact in a state of emergency, that is great for building relationships, but it's also a good way to help them feel at ease that they're going to be supported if they need to in an emergency. Also, it's a great way to disseminate information about emergency preparedness. And then a word about tribal communities. As I said, they are sovereign nations. They often have their own emergency evacuation plans. They have a plan for what they're going to do with any of their members. And so I would just suggest reaching out and making sure that whatever agency you're representing is part of that conversation. We can help with this. We would like to give you some information about that. Ultimately, as a sovereign nation, they get to choose how they respond to anything, just like regular citizens, but as a collective, they may have their own plans and they may just completely opt out of what you're planning for emergency preparedness, and that is their want, absolutely. If they do have an emergency plan, see if you can try to talk about how your agency can support that if that's appropriate. Understand their leadership structure. In my experience, the tribal nations in Oregon are governed by sort of a council of elders. Those are the ones we talk to when we need to. And we at the city are very fortunate to have someone who serves as a liaison with the tribal communities in our area. So that liaison is going to be super, super great resource for you as well. All right, so to sum up, I do again want to leave time for questions. These are for all audiences, and again, in all circumstances. And this is not going to be new information for a lot of you. I think it will make a lot of sense. But choosing trusted messengers is key, right? That's what we talked about, building the relationships. Messaging must be multimodal. I have gone through the FEMA emergency advanced public information officer training, and we talk a lot about the cry wolf fallacy, where everyone thinks if you send out too many messages or try to prepare too much, then people will start disregarding the messages. That's actually not a thing, so go ahead and send the messages. And we also know that people they really have to hear something from more than one source. So even if we did a radio broadcast, it's a level 1 evacuation you need to go, or that would be a level 3 that you need to go. They're still gonna call their best friends who live across the street and see if they've heard that too. They're gonna check social media if that's available, see if it's there. They will go to at least 3 places for confirmation before they actually take that evacuation. So be prepared to provide all of those. All right. When you do notify them that there needs to be an evacuation or a boil water notice or whatever the case may be, make sure that your messages when you're doing, say, using emergency alert system has action items, something you can do. Nothing, as we all know, is more frustrating than being given some news and then not being told what to do about it. Do I leave? Where do I go? What do I do with my pets? All of those things. So you'll definitely want to make sure that all of your messages have that bit of information in them. And messaging must be consistent. We all struggle with this if you've got higher ups that you have to screen messages through and you have multiple representatives of your agency. Just make sure everyone is saying the same thing. And again, preparation in advance is key to this. Clear directions are vital. If you do not give accurate information, if people are getting conflicting information, it's just going to erode trust and you're not going to be able to get buy-in when you ask people to take an action in the future. All right, 17 minutes. This is just my contact information here. Anyone can email me anytime, but I'd love to take questions about that whirlwind. I hope everyone's heads are still on straight after all of that. Yeah, in the back there.
Wait,
yes, I will.
Take just a second to get back over.
I can repeat the question. He was asking what a trap line is. This was a new term to me in the FEMA training as well, but trap line just means physical locations where you can put a written or some sort of actual visible communication. Others? Oh, I'll just let the people with the mic choose.
I run the emergency public information system on a daily basis at work. So we have our AM alert, we use Everbridge for our mass notification system and iPods and everything. I was just wondering for your AM radio system, like what kinds of things do you put out there? Like a lot of ours are hurricane based and evacuation oriented, but we're looking to do more with our AM alerts. So I was just wondering what kind of information you put out there, if it's something that you update routinely.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have hurricanes in Oregon, obviously, but we do a lot of things around wildfires. We have such stormwater infrastructure that we don't really get floods there, but we do have heavy rain, as everyone knows Oregon's reputation. So the things that we tend to put out, if they are not specifically related to an actual emergency, if they're more like sort of warning type things, is encouraging people to sign up for Everbridge and some of the other ones that you mentioned. We do a little bit of emergency preparedness. A lot of people in Eugene think that if an emergency happens, the city or county is going to help them, and we're just not. It's up to every individual to have their own storage of food, their own water supply, their own gas stocked up. This is the thing I worry about the most if we have a significant emergency like that, is that everyone's going to be looking to us for help, and we will do what we can. We do have shelters and we do have some emergency supplies, but certainly not enough for the city the size of Eugene. So a lot of what we do is sort of preparedness tips and trying to educate the public about the fact that they will essentially be on their own. So preventative, honestly. Does that answer your question? Okay. Hi.
My question is, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how much time you spend building the relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a great question. It depends on the reception I get when I reach out. There have been times where people have just said, not interested, we'll take care of our own. And sometimes you just say, okay, that's great, but I still send them the emails with the extra information and they can do with it what they like. If you have somebody who is with a nonprofit organization, say that serves, say, a senior center or something like that, they're generally very open. You know, I just keep popping in. If we do have those preparedness emails or anything like that that I can be sending out, I make sure I get their contact information. And I kind of do a trickle type situation, just a little bit here and there, just to keep people remembering that I am the contact and that I'm the person to ask if they need help or have questions. And so just trying to stay in touch, try to stay top of mind. Again, if they're resistant, be happy, be friendly about it, and just say, okay, maybe I'll look you up again in another 3 months. Just be gracious and keep chipping away at it.
So I'm curious about some of your nonprofit networks and partners, and just wondering if, in your experience, political parties are actually good partners or not.
That is a great question. We do not get into that. I would actually be really interested to hear if anybody, maybe during the break, if anyone has a story about how they worked with a specific political party or both political parties on messaging. That would be really interesting to hear. Again, Eugene is sort of known as a liberal area, but we have a lot of libertarians and things like that. So I could see it being beneficial to reach out to the party leaders in your area and just kind of talk about how you can work together. At the very least, what are they going to say? No? Yeah, we hear that all the time. So give that a shot. I love that idea. The back there?
I would have an example. We have
Okay, right here. Sorry.
So, for your program, what kind of research do you do in terms of measuring success or measuring the awareness of the community, because it goes up and down, right?
It sure does. Yeah, that's a great question. And we all struggle with ROI and metrics that prove communication's worth, right? So the number of signups that we get for the emergency alert system after we do a campaign is one. We try to keep our eye on the numbers to make sure that they're rising for all of our emergency alert capabilities. We mostly use Everbridge, but there are others as well that are run nationally. What do you think? I'm not on Nextdoor, but I lurk and spy on Nextdoor. Anybody else do that? Yeah. Honestly, it would drive me crazy to get in there and try to do any commenting because it's just the Wild West in there. But I do love to eavesdrop. I love to go in there and see what people are talking about, what concerns they're having, particularly in neighborhoods. Again, I work in public works, so we have a lot of transportation projects that people get very upset about because they're detoured. So I'm in there a lot. And I think if there were a conversation going on around emergency planning, and I saw that it was in there, I might even start one myself and use that. Nextdoor is is both strangely specific by neighborhood, but then also very general. I don't think I've quite got my finger on the pulse of it yet, but again, that's mostly because I'm horrified every time I go on. Who's next? Okay.
So you had mentioned if you have an example on how to collaborate with elected officials. So I do PR for the Housing Authority. It is a quasi-government independent agency. But if I see a public records request from a journalist with a specific topic, I will call the PR department at the city that is separate from us and say, hey, this is coming.
Right.
This is our positioning. This is what I'm doing. I'm not asking what they're saying. They might share if they want, but my interest is that we are aligned. And we have elected officials that are more active than others, that will vouch for our projects for funding, that will come and speak of our residents. And when I see a reporter asking about something related to our work with them, I will call their aide and have a conversation. This is going on, this is what we are saying. There is no law that prohibits me from doing that, so I do that. We collaborate with elected officials in all levels, and we keep an open channel.
Thank you for that experience. Yeah, public records requests are very enlightening, and the way that Nextdoor is actually, in my opinion, I don't know if everyone gets to look at those, but when you start seeing a trend in your public records request, that might require action.
Good morning. I have a question about the animal community, animal rescue community. For a while, I represented a child sanctuary which rescued wolf dogs, had 50 to 60 animals on property, and we faced evacuation during a couple of wildfires and hurricanes. So they had extra crates and they had extra trailers available, but there was never a caller, like an organized effort from the government to have that list or know what those resources were. And so we just had to organically show up at different places. Since you mentioned horse people,
yes,
I just thought, is there a way that you organize that ahead of time and keep those as potential resources to help speed evacuations from people?
Yeah, that is a great question, and the answer, fortunately, is yes. The great thing about horse people is, although they're a little bit crazy, they're also very close-knit, right? So if you have a problem with your horse, or you need to move, you need to evacuate, you'll have 10 people with a horse trailer and they're ready to haul you out. So very, very connected group. And that is why working with vets and other members of those types of communities is so important. You can get a gauge for how many trailers are going to be available. You can get an idea of how many they can fit, what type of volume you would need at the fairgrounds where we put people in the horse stalls, whether they're going to be able to fit all of those people. So just a lot of, again, a lot of advanced research. If anybody's involved in one of those groups that has large animals or has, again, specific needs that's in this room, I definitely suggest you reach out to an emergency manager, either with your city or your county, and just introduce yourself and try to make that connection and say, here's how many horse owners we have in the area, here's how many trailers we can have at our disposal. The rough thing in our area, specifically around horses, is wildfires. It's very, you often have to evacuate very quickly. A lot of people, once they leave, can't get back. So a lot of advanced coordination, but again, I know for a fact that the horse community in our area has already done some of that work themselves.
Hi. I wanted to go back to when you said the people that you were communicating to are not clear that it is their responsibility to take care of themselves. And I'm curious about what kind of messaging you use for that, because we all know the naysayers are the loudest, and when something happens and the city doesn't respond as they want them to respond, they scream it to wherever they can. So you're spending all this effort creating this communication with people, saying, talk to us, connect with us. What kind of messaging do you provide them to let them know that when it does come time for that moment, they're kind of on their own outside of what the city's actually responsible what
Yeah.
their responsibilities are.
Mhm. That could be tricky, right? You can't just come out and say, well, we're not gonna help you. You need to be a little more diplomatic than that. We really take a position that we're providing resources. It's a very subtle way to say we're not gonna help you when we say, here's your closest emergency water station. Here's where you can get discounted freeze-dried food. So we try to give them information. Just again, we are strangely lucky in that we have Cascadia as a thing, the Cascadia earthquake as a thing that's top of mind for a lot of people in our area, because we can use that as an example. And we can also assume that if there were an earthquake, we would potentially lose bridges, roadways. Our only hospital in the Eugene Springfield area is on the other side of the Willamette River. We're not sure how people are going to be able to get over there. It's a very large problem. And right now, some of the transportation projects we're doing in Eugene are seismic retrofits to make sure the bridges that connect different parts of cities do not fall. Those types of things where you're being very transparent and vocal about preparation pieces that you're doing as the city. You can say, we're doing this ourselves to support you when you may need emergency services, or you may run out of your medicine and need to get to a store, or a lot of you. It's in the pronouns, and we really just try to repeat it often in a very kind way. We still get people who don't get it. I get daily emails from people saying, what is the city doing to prepare for Cascadia? And of course, we have a huge, long plan that I just send them to on the website, which is great. But I still try to put in some messages that I ask them if you can help us get out the message about individual preparation. That's going to be key. We also have our county sheriff's office does a lot of that. A lot of that effort is county-wide, because Lane County is very large, and a little less about specifically the city or any smaller organization than county.
Good morning, thank you for being here. I'm from Maui, Hawaii. So as you know, we had the Lahaina wildfires. So I'm particularly curious, with power outage, in our situation, our town was without power immediately and for many days. 5 days later, we still only had 60% power. Have you seen or experienced any type of pre-planned strike team, or because our comms team was held up in the EOC trying to manage the outside Lahaina chaos going on with media, but we had no ability to send in a team into the town to convey messaging. They had no radio, all cell towers were down, all of our police were obviously busy. We had no team there to help disseminate safety information. We tried civil air patrol, we did all sorts of things, but have you seen or implemented anything in that gap time?
Do they have any sort of radio capabilities like ham radio, shortwave?
We had ham radio. It took us a little bit of time to get the ham radio folks up. So that was a slow process. I can't say that we reached the vast majority. We had visitor industry locked up, literally in hotels. We had shelters were moving back and forth. It was very, very chaotic in that time.
I imagine. Obviously in preparing for advance, if you know you have the ham radio operators in your area, establish a relationship with them beforehand, so they'll know that you'd like them to help. And if they're not going to help, then they'll tell you then, right? And so you'll know that you do not have that resource. I'm just trying to think, satellite phones would be another thing to potentially have in the area, or some sort of communication that is battery operated. The weather radios are crank usually, so those give you an opportunity to use during a power outage. That sounds like a challenge if you can't physically get people there to post any sort of information or anything. I think in that case, I would try at least to have a relationship with the police. Obviously, as you say, they were dealing with other things during those the fires and evacuations. But hopefully, if a police officer was going somewhere that you could send someone to share a message, hitch a ride in the back of the patrol vehicle and get out there to get, again, those trap lines. That's the exact situation in which you use a trap line. You need something physical. That's a challenging one. I think you have to talk ahead of time about what your contingencies are. I imagine you've done so since that happened. Come up with a plan for those situations. It's really hard when there's no power at all, no phones. Everyone just assumes phones are always going to be around, and it's shocking, obviously. I think people really panic when they don't have at least a phone. I think they can live without the internet for a minute, but the phone is very important. This is why some people are going back to landlines in their homes after everyone got rid of them.
Is that one final?
The last one, 43 seconds.
Thank you, Marion.
Go, Diane.
This has been great. Thank you so much. One thing I don't know if I heard you say, but I'm a volunteer CERT member in my community, right? The
Yes.
Community Emergency Response Team. And those are also done through the neighborhood associations, right? And so the CERT team, they encourage all of us to thread out in our own neighborhoods and help our own neighbors. I have some elderly neighbors, so that's another tool that will be a information relayer for you, and another sort of that where people can go if they know who the CERT people are in their own neighborhoods or their neighborhood association. And then homeowners associations, right? Because they're thinking about their own neighborhood. So those are some additional resources that I know cities do. The city I live in, Beaverton, has a really good relationship with its neighborhood associations and meets with them regularly in the CERT. And so that's also beneficial. That's sort of the blue sky day relationship that you build ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, CERT organizations, is anyone aware that they have CERT groups in their area? Okay, these are community members who are doing emergency preparedness and training in advance so that they can help others in their community if that were to happen. Those are very, very important. Thank you. I'm going to add that to my slide, Diane. And neighborhood associations, I know they were up there, but I cannot overstate how important a relationship with neighborhood associations is if you have that ability to create those. We have wonderful relationships with ours, and we get a lot of information that way. Okay, thank you everyone for the great questions.
We have a short 10-minute break, and then we'll get started with our next session.